We're going to talk about messaging. Becky's here. Hey, Becky.
Hello, how are you?
I'm kicking butt.
Oh, good.
What
I
is
want to
with
be like
you?
you. I'm doing well.
So I talk about messaging all day long on social media. I'm so glad that somebody else also is talking about messaging. So really looking forward to your talk.
All right, well, good. I'm
And
actually,
so the stage is yours. I'm gonna minimize myself here.
all right, let's see. All right, we're good. All right. So my name is Becky Trevino. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing and Operations at a company called Snow Software. What we do at Snow is help IT understand all of the technology. So think about all these SaaS products. Teams, Jeff Calendly just talked about Heap, for example. All of the SaaS software, all of the on-premises software, all of the cloud technologies you use in your organization. We help IT understand what's being used, how much you're spending on it, and ways to reduce that spend. So that's what we do at Snow. So a little bit in terms of my role at Snow is a little bit too focused. One is I drive product marketing. So that's messaging, positioning, pricing, as well as I'm starting up a group called Product Operations. I report into the Chief Product Officer at Snow. And Product Operations is great because I'm trying to build a function that enables product marketing, product management, product owners to have the data that they need, as well as the operational function to better understand both our customers as well as just the market trends that are going in. So I'm really excited about this new role. But for today, the focus is going to be how to know when your message is the problem. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the 4 signs of those may be. Then I'm going to get into a story of how this happened to me. So the 4 signs your message may be a problem really start in this ambiguous way because no one really knows. And that's the big story. I wish I could bottle it up for you and tell you, yes, if you do this one thing, the message is the problem. It's just a variety of signs that you notice. So the first one ends up being if you missed your objectives, your campaign is falling flat, you're not missing those targets that you thought by this day I should be at X and I'm at Y. That's usually one sign. But then the other sign ends up being, usually you can correct that, is look, all of my input metrics, everything that I thought, I've worked with digital media, this is the target I put in, everything. When you notice that everything that should have been an input into meeting that output metric, which is your campaign objectives, are green, that should start giving you a view of like, this is weird. There's not one thing of this that is going wrong that makes me think that there's something, right? So I've set up the campaign right, I've set up things, but yeah, I'm still missing the objective. What's going wrong? There could be another sign mixed in with 1 and 2 that your message is. But number 3 is once you start getting some of the output, start getting in some of the traffic, start getting in some of the customers. And if when you're attracting the wrong audience, that's another telltale sign that your message may be the problem. When the target audience you were going in there to speak to isn't actually getting it, you're not reaching those people. That's another sign. And finally, the one is, it's simple as not seeing that engagement, which I see a little bit as different than missing the objectives, is you kind of put a CTA into a particular site, or you put down a level of response that you wanted from the audience and you're just not getting it. These are all intercombined signs that the message is going to be the problem. Unfortunately, for many of us, it's not going to scream at you. There's not going to be some data piece that says the message is the problem. You're going to have this mix of understanding some of these signs in order to get it. I'm going to tell you the story about the first time that this really hit home for me. I was a senior director of product marketing at a company called Rackspace. That was my former company. And I had just switched roles. And I had been somebody that was very public cloud, think like AWS, Google centric. And I was moving into Rackspace's core business, which was something I just really wasn't very educated on. It was a lot of, if you're familiar with cloud, a lot of dedicated servers, a lot of VMware, which is really sold into a core IT, a very different persona that I had been used to in other roles. And what I noticed was this new team had a very large multi-million-dollar paid media budget. So it wasn't just that traditional B2B marketing. There was a very B2C component to this role where we generated millions and millions of dollars off of direct hits to our website. So we had a very strong digital marketing front. And I walked in the role, kind of looked in and said, okay, here's what we've been messaging. And I noticed a shift. We had stopped using this term called dedicated servers, and we had moved over to managed hosting. This had been a term that our internal leadership had asked. So we started putting a lot of just emphasis on, let's put in that managed hosting piece. And I just was like, okay, great. Leadership knows this. The product manager cuts in, sounds like this is good messaging. I just kind of put it into our paid media funnel, put some dollars behind it. And everybody looked at the message, kind of talked through. And then I noticed that the numbers were actually getting worse. And I looked across, and similar to the framework I just gave you, is all of my input metrics I was targeting, the IT director, I was targeting the CIO, the sysadmin, everybody I thought would be, there were green signals. That was the person I was targeting, but I wasn't ever getting the conversion that I thought I would be. And it took me a while to understand the why. It was this concept that I was testing this managed hosting one as well. And I had tried various subject lines, various display ads to get it right. Went with the one that sounded the best, or that gave me the best traction. But at the end of the day, what was the story was that it wasn't the right message for that audience. People still called it dedicated servers. And when I was talking about managed hosting, it just didn't resonate with the audience. And the big story there is I had worked hard to get new creative, I'd built new content. But at the end of the day, because my message did not resonate with my audience, it just fell flat. It didn't matter that I'd updated the creative. It did not matter that I had the content. The reality was I did not understand my audience and my core customer well enough that it would be one of those where I could see, hey, this audience really conveys the need of dedicated servers. They actually don't know what I mean when I say managed hosting. So it does not matter. So when Patrick was asking about the input metrics, it does not matter that my agency is telling me that I'm reaching the right audience. And that says like, yes, it does not matter that I'm getting some traction. They're just never going to convert on it because they just don't know what it means. So that was the big lesson for me in this one, because the marketing nirvana at the end of the day is you reach the right person with the right message at the right time. I scratched out on this right time because this isn't the focus of my talk. Focus of my talk is messaging is critical for two main reasons. Is that you want it to engage your intended audience. You want to ensure that you are getting the most out of that marketing dollar because you're driving some type of hook that gets that person that's just surrounded and overwhelmed by data and messages to be like, that's interesting to me. And then if you're also just starting out as a new company, there's elements of number two that you may have insights into an audience that you may have missed. For example, many of us have heard a marketing story where somebody has built a product, for example, that was intended for millennials, but at the end of the day, it was soccer moms that were buying it. There's sometimes that when you are marketing, you will learn as you look through some of the data that, hey, I wasn't intending to sell to that audience. It may have looked red, but I've identified a new audience that I wasn't expecting that actually finds my product compelling. And in that world, you may understand and learn something that your product management team may have missed, that your organization may not have been aware of. We had this happen at a previous company where we were selling a product that was dedicated to all audiences. We kind of had no segmentation for it. And we just said, look, we're across the board. And then realized that the high end of the market really found this product more appealing than the low end of the market. And what we ended up doing was streamlining our message to that. But we wouldn't have known that if we wouldn't have focused on this idea of who actually likes the product the most. Because even though we were trying to go after the midsection of the market, because that's where the larger addressable market was, we were finding that midsection of the market really wasn't driving it. So the key for us when it comes to messaging is to really drive this synergy between who you're marketing to and who is actually buying it. And there's a variety of just different analytics and testing in terms of what you should do and what you should look at to get to this result. the biggest barrier to getting to this results really surrounds yourself around message testing, has been my conclusion. This was my case when I spoke to you about the dedicated servers managed hosting scenario, as I kind of had this metric of, look, there was an internal expert. In this case, it had been a senior leader for me that said, oh, this audience, you need to stop using this term dedicated servers. We go out there, you're going to be fine with managed hosting. I was new to role. And I said, well, we're doing this whole conversion, but usually there's an external expert. You just go off, you sign up on that message, you go in, you run a series of tests, and it seems like message A performs better than message B and C. And you're like, okay, that's fine. Marketing managers then put that into campaigning, you roll. So that tends to be one scenario of just not having enough data. And then there's other scenarios on the other side of it where you're swimming in the data. You have tons and tons of testing data where you have subject line, tagline, CTA, landing page data, but you've actually lost context of what really matters to the audience. You're just swimming in where you're going, and you're just so intermixed on this that you don't know at the end of the day what pain points that you're solving for, and that you've lost that emotional connection to the audience. And at the end of the day, that is good marketing, is to have that emotional connection to who it is you're trying to reach. So a big context I'm trying to drive myself as a marketer in, and I advise others as you're on this journey of really understanding how to get to that message. Because if there's one takeaway I want you to go from this role, it's just not simple. If it were simple, one of us would have bottled it and we would be selling this in mass to everybody. It's what makes marketing both an art and a science, is that we can't just be data driven with all of the tools that we have. We have to be data informed. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, you have to create this right balance between the qualitative and the quantitative. You have to have an opinion about what about the data is working. And this comes in from a knowledge of your customers, of your core value proposition. Because at the end of the day, that's messaging. Messaging is about how you take that position, that who you are in market, and you convey the value of that to the audience at large. And the only way you do that is by understanding the value that you're creating. So a quick one there is talk to your best customers and sales leaders. Don't just go by what somebody an internal expert has told you. You as a whole, if you're in charge of this category, if you're the product marketer, if you're the marketing manager, deeply understand the buying triggers. If somebody has told you that, ask the questions of, how do you know that? Did you just know that? Did you test that? Understand the pain points, the purchase criteria, the desired outcomes. I always tell the story that particularly in B2B software, there's always a champion. There's always somebody who's putting their badge on the line to be the person that goes in there and says, we need this piece of software. We need this tool in order to operationally be better. And it's up to that person to talk to multiple people to get engagement of that. And you really had to understand what it is that that person is trying to achieve and trying to reach in order to drive success. And that desired outcome, that end state, that's what you need to sell and promote. But you, as whether you're the digital marketer, the product marketer, campaign marketer, you need to understand what those are and not just be like me, who took that and said, oh, some smart person understood this. Let's go in there and just believe that. You need to test and understand why, particularly if, like in my situation, there had been a change in the way that in the message, in the category. And a lot of times that happens in technology marketing because technology changes really quickly. There's a lot of disruption. There's a lot of category creation. And as that comes in, common terms change. And as those common terms and the buyers change, common terminology becomes old. And you need to understand what resonates and doesn't resonate. And sometimes you may move, as I did in my previous example, just too soon. The second step, once you've really gotten a foundation of understanding that deep qualitative, which sometimes comes in from quantitative, of survey data and interview data, is to synthesize those learnings. Pay attention to the buying triggers, the pain points, and the wins, and then translate those. Make them easy to consume. A lot of product marketers make this into messaging decks, ideal customer profiles, segmentation, or messaging frameworks. But synthesize those learnings in ways in which the organization can consume them. And then from there, really embrace message testing. This is one that a lot of organizations don't do as well. Embrace it in chunks. Test if something's going to be your tagline, or your core value proposition. Test it. Test whether or not that resonates. Sometimes that can be, just running a digital media campaign. Sometimes it's going to be going large with that campaign in only one market versus a market at large. Sometimes it's going to be testing in one segment. Sometimes it's just going to be a banner ad or, some SEO or a landing page, but test it and make sure that you're able to extract what you need to in pieces of that data, potentially the value prop, potentially a tagline, potentially just a CTA, in order to create it digestible enough for you to understand and be able to do something with that output. The fourth one is think. There's a reason that the data is there. And what I spoke about being data informed rather than just data driven is that when you're looking at that testing data, ask yourself, what about this message is working? Not just, hey, that works, but rather, what about it? And if you don't really understand that, really get a good feel for why that particular message is working over others. Because when you dig into that, when you may add that qualitative research or speak to some other experts that you could get into that, you may learn items that you just didn't know on your own. And these are kind of 4-part framework I've done since this big event, since my dedicated servers failure, at really trying to understand when my message could be falling flat in market. There's some signs, obviously the big one, I try to put some ones in there for all of you, but usually it's like when you can't figure out, what else could go wrong? It's sometimes just the text. It's sometimes just the message. And it's always a variable for you to take into account as different items happen. For me, the goal is to work smarter, not just harder, as I develop campaigns. When I think back of, when you're in the thrust of campaign creation, your thrust of going out there and trying to generate demand, find new users, it can be really simple to just get into a go, go, go mentality. And instead, I think we have to take a step back, understand that at the end of any messaging, at the end of any campaign, there are people involved, people with needs, emotions that are driving some of these budgets. And we have to sit there and connect ourselves back to that. And from there, go in there and understand that with the data in order to build campaigns that actually have that traction. With that, that's pretty much nearing the end of my talk. And, my view and invitation is for any of you that are looking to work smarter and this talk really resonated with you as far as some areas that you could talk to, direct message me on LinkedIn. Let me know how this has been helpful for you. I think the win for you is some accountability. If there was something in here like, hey, I want to change some of the parts that I work. And a win for me is, the subject of today is testing my message as part of this talk, is did I resonate well enough to create some value for some of you that, generously gave me 20 minutes of your time. So this is my view on LinkedIn, and I hope this was helpful for you.
Thank you so much, Becky.
You're welcome.
I have questions. So, obviously I'm in the business of message testing with Winter. And the challenge I see with when a lot of people know that they should be testing their messaging, but there's an even bigger pool of people who have no idea, because the symptoms of ineffective messaging are very hard to spot.
Yeah.
People might have terrible copy, but how would they know? Because the way most copy is written and shipped is like, oh, looks pretty good to me. And then, that's what sticks on the website or, wherever it is. So what do you recommend? How would somebody even figure out that their messaging might be ineffective?
I think a big part goes into that you have to have some level of ownership. because a lot of times I've worked with marketers that have just trusted me as their product marketing manager to just know it all. And I gave the case in this talk that said, I didn't know it all. And I led my digital marketing team astray. I led them wrong. And so as the digital marketing team supporting, somebody's like, hey, Becky, let's have a talk about this campaign we want to run. You're obviously the expert in the product and the persona, but why did you choose that? Why do you think this message is going to work? And just start asking some fundamental, like, how did you get there? Did you just, was it, and then somebody would have realized, oh, that was just because C-level so-and-so. So I think that's a first step is for us to ask some questions. The other part really is going out there and developing plans, particularly if you're going to go embark on a large campaign that's incorporating message testing as part of the function. There's a lot of organizations that just go with what an expert has put in and just go to market with that. So if you're not a culture where that testing is prevalent, that's a step one. But another one, if sometimes teams are just in a rush to get something in market, but I do think it's important to at least ask the question of, how did you get here? Why do you think that this is a problem?
Another problem that I see with messaging is getting to a confident consensus. So let's say that CEO has a vision of what we should say and what the message should be. And salespeople all day on phone calls, they're like, well, actually another thing works. So you CEO, you can say whatever you want. I'm going to use this positioning and messaging. And then, somebody else might have their own idea, like paid team runs their own messaging, and people can't agree on what should go on the homepage. And they usually, what goes on the homepage is like the highest paid person's opinion, but not everybody agrees. So how do you get to a confident consensus where everybody agrees and thinks that the messaging we have is the one that we should have?
So I was having this conversation yesterday. Someone was saying about how the CMO tenure is so low. And I have this hypothesis as to why. And it ties back to your question, is that your marketing, in particular your web page, is the gathering point of all of the dysfunction in an organization. So whenever there's that misalignment between the CEO and the sales team and the marketing team, it pops up in your marketing because nobody knows what to say. And that when you don't know who you are, that's really prevalent in your messaging. When you know who you are and that's alignment, then it's crisp and it's clean and you know who you're targeting. So it ends up going back to the company strategy. Andy Raskin, who's a leader in strategic narrative, always starts with the CEO, is if your CEO isn't bought into that narrative of what you're doing, then that's going to be a really big challenge. And in your example, if your sales teams aren't bought into it, it's a secondary challenge. So you have to drive that alignment as marketing leaders with your CEO. Do they agree with this messaging positioning? A lot of times, particularly early stage companies, that's their vision, that's the baby. They should be driving it of what it comes in. But particularly as organizations scale, sometimes there's that disconnection. So I think first it's driving that alignment with the CEO, and then understanding, in a situation like you just described, why is it that the sales teams don't see it as that? There's often good reasons as to why it is. Like if they're seeing some traction with some particular use cases, I don't think we ignore that problem. I think we should embrace it and figure out, well, is it very different than the other message? Or maybe if I combine them, there's something there. But at the end of the day, in those scenarios, it's just strategic misalignment.
Yeah. And so what do you do if there is a strategic misalignment? How do you fix it?
You have to, it depends on your role. As a product marketing leader, I try to take stewardship of the messaging and positioning. I've been in situations where I haven't felt that the positioning that we are driving as a company is landing well. And it starts by having the conversation. I've had the conversation with my leadership team to say, here are some signs I don't believe it's working. One of them that typically goes, my customer's not repeating it back to me. We've been in market with this for months, and they're still using some of the old way in which we talk about it. Or when my sales reps are talking through the value, they're kind of confused how to talk through me. Or some of my numbers are coming in. So I raise the flag to my leadership first, and then I start raising the flag with some of my peers. And I try to get some head nods around the room and say, oh, well, can we re-examine that position, that message, and then try to drive a consensus. But it does take someone in the organization to feel like it's their responsibility. And marketing managers too, if they find failed campaigns that aren't meeting their objectives, they certainly should be raising that flag to their leadership and understanding, like, if the message is the problem, is product marketing, for example, if there's somebody who's supplying it, or my salesperson, do they just not understand? And maybe they have some wrong input metrics in there.
And while on the topic of metrics, so which metric should we measure to measure the effectiveness of the messaging?
There's no like one size fits all metric. A lot of times at the end of the day is, what were you looking to achieve? So if in that campaign you were looking to achieve greater awareness, did you achieve it or did you not? But I've always been a big fan of using small tests. Sometimes it's subject lines in an email. Sometimes it's a display ad. Sometimes it's, can I get a page to, can I put something on social and see if I can get some message. So I think it's a question of small tests to see if there's some interest there. But in general, the larger one around messaging is, at the end of the day, what we want to achieve is higher sales. And if we're not getting more sales, then something is wrong. And at the core of that, sometimes that, if it's missed pipeline, if it's missed other things, it's whatever we're conveying isn't resonating with the people that we want it to resonate with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in full agreement. So when it comes to like website, if it's e-commerce, it's sales, add to carts. If it's B2B SaaS, get a demo or sign up, whatever the CTA is, like the primary call to action is like the best. Like, do we have a message market fit over here or not? Especially for startups, like if you're launching a new product and people are like churning, okay, the product has problems, right? But like to get them in the product first, you need to nail the messaging at first. Like, they need to want whatever it is you're promising.
And I think that's where you end up getting those signs. So it's really, that was my number 4 on the list, is if you're not getting that engagement or conversion. And there's usually what I found is, if there's a combination or all 4 of those that I started in, those 4 hints, then that's usually a sign that says message. There's no software there that's going to say message is your problem, positioning is your problem. But usually when you can see a number of those signs coming in, it's, hey, maybe I should rethink the message. Maybe what I'm writing and putting in here isn't landing with the people that I thought. And then sometimes there's situations where that's great. I've heard of situations where I referenced an example where we had a product that we had built for a totally different segment, but it landed with another segment. We weren't expecting that, but it landed, and we found product market fit with somebody, especially early stage, that we didn't think that's who we were building for. And so what we did was cater more of our message to those people because they were willing to buy us at that time. And then our roadmap ended up building us to be a more total addressable market for these other people that we had wanted to reach. But what we realized is we had a value prop that resonated with that audience that didn't resonate with some others.
I see this behavior all the time in winter, where B2B companies come up, they test the same messaging with multiple ICPs, marketing people, product people, and whatever. And then they see who actually cares about like the main points of value they're selling. So yeah, absolutely, there are big differences there. Let's take a couple of questions from the audience too. Wasim is asking here. Let's see. I guess he's really asking about prioritization. Like, it's not realistic to test every message we put out there. There's like tweets, LinkedIn posts, blog posts, and then we have our like website pages. So what should we test, run through message testing, and what should we just ship?
I'm a big one that usually, like message frameworks, you try to have like a tagline, or you try to test that value prop, and like someone's trying to put the value prop in 5 words or 6 words. Those are the big ones I think of. Is that connecting? Like, if you had to say, who are you let's say you're a 1 product company, and who are you as a company, and say that in 6 words or less, that's a good one to test, because that's like, does somebody even know what you do? That's a big one. How can I describe in as fewer words as I can as do? And then there's broader ones as you're going into campaigns. If you're a big campaign and email is a big part of it, and there could be 3 different ones, it's always good to test that and figure out, hey, what subject lines or what view of these can I put in if this email campaign is going to be a big part of your demand generation efforts. But I think where it comes in terms of getting the value of that product or that particular company, those taglines, those big things that help people understand who you are, I think those are the big ones to focus your testing on, and making sure that the teams internal that are giving you that message have done their homework right.
Yeah, I would add here, like any direct response page, like landing pages where you're driving hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars of traffic to, and the message better be on point.
Yeah.
Same with your homepage, key product pages, anywhere where you're trying to get people to take action. The tweak doesn't matter, or a blog post. I mean, those educational content or about page, and we're out of time. So, Becky, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
I'm glad. Again, invitation for anybody who may have questions, or if you found this valuable that you want to test, direct message me on LinkedIn. And definitely.
Beautiful.
Bye.
Thank you, Becky. Bye.